So back in 1977, we took a trip to the Philippines, and 1977 was a very important year for me. Three things happened. One, Star Wars came out May 25, 1977. Most people know about that. Also, I discovered Billy Joel because the Stranger album was out that year, and his Just the Way You Are was playing on the radio. So I discovered Billy Joel. Another thing is we took a trip to the Philippines, and during that time, I ran into the song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen. And I know it came out a few years before that. But for some reason, I ran into the cassette tape, Bohemian Rhapsody. It was in one of the stores in the Philippines. And I bought the cassette tape and absolutely fell in love with the song. And that was the first Queen song that I've ever heard. Because I was at that age, I was 11 years old. I was a weird, kind of like, you're trying to define yourself. You're trying to, like, you're not a kid anymore, but you're also not even barely a teenager, and you're nowhere near an adult. But you're trying to pretend like you're all three things. So I got a hold of Bohemian Rhapsody and listened to it. And because when you're on vacation and you come from America and you go back to a third world country and you're staying with relatives, a lot of times there's not much to do. So whatever you have, if you have a book, you're going to wind up reading that book 2 or 3 times. And whatever, if you have, like now, people have cell phones and, they got the little devices, and that's all, they can do a whole bunch of other things. But let's say, or like you have a movie. You have a movie on VHS back then, or beta. You wind up playing it over and over again. You wind up committing to it, like an album. You wind up playing it over and over again. So I had this Bohemian Rhapsody. I had a couple other tapes, Phil Collins, Genesis. And so I got obsessed with Bohemian Rhapsody. And back then, songs didn't come with lyrics, and there was no internet, so we couldn't look up, what are they saying? What is Bismillah? I thought, actually, I didn't know what he was saying, because I was 11. I didn't know what Bismillah meant. Bismillah, no, we will not let you go, let him go. And so what I did was, for 2 or 3 days, I sat there with the cassette player and played Bohemian Rhapsody over and over again. I hand wrote the lyrics as far as I can hear, which is kind of nuts. But you did a lot of that stuff back then. I did the same thing with Rapper's Delight. What else? Scenes from an Italian Restaurant by Billy Joel. So, you got to really, really know a song back then. And so we came back from the vacation. We came back to the States, and I bought the 45 RPM, the little single, 45 RPM of Bohemian Rhapsody. And then on the flip side was I'm in love with my car. And I keep thinking, it's like, why didn't they release this song? This song is fantastic also. It's especially when I was 11, 12 years old. It's like, I think they're talking about sex. He's talking about his car, but it's all sexual, which is really cool, because I can play this at school during recess, and the teachers won't confiscate my stuff, because it was all metaphors, right? The shadows are kind of weird. That's okay. Kind of lighting up. Okay, so I'm digressing. And so I was one of the few kids at school who knew Bohemian Rhapsody sort of from beginning to end. And it became like a sort of like the recess and lunch where we would sing the song, my friends and I. And so now this movie has come out, and what cracks me up is I'm in love with my car. The B-side of Bohemian Rhapsody is they actually talk about it in the movie. And Roger Taylor wrote it, he sang it, and the drums are prevalent in the song because he's a drummer. So those kinds of insight are what I really liked about Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie. That's just one aspect of why I enjoyed the movie so much. I think everybody's talking about Rami Malek's performance, and yeah, it's a tour de force to take one of the phrases from what is that? Queen's Let Me Entertain You. That's on the album Jazz. Let me entertain you. And they mention a tour de force in there. So I suffice it to say, I am a huge Queen fan. Back when I was a teenager, when all the cool kids were listening to The Doors and Journey was a big deal back then, and the Eagles. I was listening to Rush and Styx and Queen. And so years go by, and I didn't get another Queen album until my friend's dad got News of the World, and that had the We Will Rock You and We Are the Champions. And that's when I started binging on Queen albums. So that was like their golden years, I think. It was the News of the World, Queen Jazz album, and The Game. And those are the ones that I kind of memorized every song. So I know this is supposed to be a review about Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, but I'm trying to give you a context of where I'm coming from, which is a huge Queen fan. I watch every time they have the the Montreal Queen concert in 1980, one of the famous ones. I watch it. It's always on PBS. But as for the movie, I think it was balanced just right. It had enough truth to it without being sensationalist. We all know by now that Freddie Mercury was bisexual, and they deal with that in the movie, but they also deal with it in a human way, to where it wasn't weird, and it wasn't like a shock to everybody. It was almost, it was very organic. The movie flowed very well, I think. The way his wife dealt with him coming out as bisexual and telling her that his love for her is not monogamous, but she is still the most important person in his life. And for a movie to be able to pull that off, to be able to convince you that, yeah, that I can understand how that works, I think is amazing. Also, Rami Malek delivering all the lines that Freddie Mercury is historically known to have said, and for us to believe in it. And of course, they say Rami Malek's performance, he's already won a Golden Globe Award for Best Acting. And he's up for Best Actor for the Academy Awards next week. I've listened to Queen long enough so that I know Freddie Mercury's voice compared to Rami Malek's voice, and they've actually mix them in the movie. They kind of, it's almost like when a DJ mixes two different albums and one album blends into another. I've noticed they did that in some of the songs in the movie, where it starts off Rami Malek, and then when the really hard notes come in, they merge it with Freddie Mercury's voice, and vice versa. And I noticed Rami Malek is a little bit off. His Rami Malek is, I can't believe it's the same guy, because when you hear him on Mr. Robot, at least me, I keep thinking, it's like, how does that voice become Freddie Mercury? But he pulls it off, and it is not distracting. After a while, I just kind of forgot about it, because the story is also compelling, and there's enough revelation in it, even though, even for a person like me, because, I was a teenager back then, and I would get those teenage magazines, like Teen Beat, Tiger Beat, 16 magazine, and then I would get the Rolling Stone magazine. I think there was a Cream magazine, CREEM, that talked about music, and Parade magazine, something like that. Yeah. So I read all the articles about Queen, and then there was that gap of my understanding of Queen, where Freddie Mercury, all of a sudden, he got a short haircut and he got the mustache, and I was wondering, like, what happened? And it was during the disco era, where everybody was kind of changing their look and style anyway. So I sort of didn't pay too much attention to it. But now this movie explains it very well. And again, the way the movie presents it is not a caricature. It is not a comedic or a shallow presentation. Rami Malek's portrayal of Freddie Mercury he portrayed Freddie Mercury in a humanistic, compassionate way. It is one of the most three-dimensional portrayals that I've ever seen of a historical figure, a person that really lived. You think of like historical figures being portrayed. You think of like Daniel Day-Lewis portraying Abraham Lincoln, or any of the actors that portray like John F. Kennedy, or like The Doors. That's a pretty good movie too. The way Val Kilmer portrayed Jim Morrison. Actually, that's a good movie to like make a double feature of the Doors movie and Bohemian Rhapsody, and I think that would make a good double feature. And also, I heard Val Kilmer sang all his parts. That's his actual voice in the movie. So, will I see Bohemian Rhapsody the movie again? Yes. I want to give it some time to kind of forget about the movie. So if enough time passes, I can see it with a fresh set of eyes and mind again, hopefully. And I will probably pick up more little like nuances, especially how they met at the beginning. I love that how they met, how it's almost surreal how Freddie Mercury basically just tells him, I'm your lead singer, I'm good enough, and I will have this. It's almost like he was a force. What do they call that? He was a force. He wasn't just a person, he was a force. And he imposed himself creatively on every person that he ran into. But at the same time, he had the talent to back it up. They're dealing with the music executives, with Mike Myers in The Office. I think that's another understated, and Mike Myers pulled it off. And unless you look really carefully, it's hard to notice that that's Mike Myers behind the beard and glasses. It's an underappreciated role, I think. It's like Tom Cruise in what is that? What is that movie, that the parody war movie that Tom Cruise was in? What else? Oh, okay. So the different characters. I think so there were members of Queen. There's Freddie Mercury, Brian May, lead guitarist, John Deacon, bassist, and Roger Taylor is the drummer. And John Deacon, the bassist, the actor, is actually the kid in Jurassic Park, the first one. I think. You got to double check it. I think that's him. And the Brian May actor, it's creepy how much he looks like a Brian May, a younger Brian May. So I wonder if they actually really look like each other, or he's just, the actor is just so, his mannerisms were just right on. Brian May has almost a stoic, the total polar opposite from Freddie Mercury in terms of his flamboyance. And they pulled it off in this movie. John Deacon I always knew he was sort of the odd man out, and they portrayed him as such in the movie, which is kind of refreshing. And then Roger Taylor was the ones that got the girls. He was the blonde guy, the drummer of all things, of course. And he did what he did. And it was, I think it was portrayed perfectly. I want to see it again now. Now, the more I talk about it, the more I want to see it again. It's hard to appreciate a musical biopic. I think it's because I grew up in the MTV generation, and musical biopics, it's like once a week, especially with VH1. Behind the Music, there was that show on VH1. It was like, there was MTV, and then when MTV got really successful, VH1 came out, and they had these biographies, musical biographies, almost like once a week. And by the time like 10 years went by and you didn't want to see musical biopics anymore, nobody cared. So, but in this, I think it's the right time that Bohemian Rhapsody came out, and I love how they really put enough effort to on the actual song Bohemian Rhapsody. They put enough emphasis on it, and they spent enough time. They took their time with Bohemian Rhapsody, the song, so that you got enough of it. It's such a, of course the word is seminal. It's a seminal song. It defines Queen, even though Queen has so many other songs. I don't think Bohemian Rhapsody is my favorite Queen song. But I think it is the best Queen song. I think it is one of the best, if not tied for the best, rock and roll song in history. Up there with Stairway to Heaven and Hotel California. And I like how the movie took its time to flesh out the Bohemian Rhapsody song itself. I kind of wish they spent more time with the songs in the jazz album. But like Bicycle Race, I'm surprised that I gotta watch the movie again. I wonder if they played Bicycle Race in there. But they played enough of sort of like the fan favorites. And the movie got me. It's like, it's like You Had Me at Hello from Jerry Maguire. That You Had Me at Hello moment for me was when near the beginning of the movie, when Freddie Mercury had trouble fiddling with the microphone stand, and he just yanked it out, and the top half came out. So he had the microphone, but also the top half of the stand. And anybody who has gone to a Queen concert or has seen footage of Queen in concert knows Freddie Mercury's iconic microphone stand, the way he holds it, and he waves it like a baton. Maybe we should call it like a microphone baton. Freddie Mercury's microphone baton, and he conducts his concerts as well as the audience. He's the leader of this whole thing. Some of these movies sometimes, I think, focuses too much on one character, so it's unbalanced. But I think with Bohemian Rhapsody, they had no choice but to make it a Freddie Mercury is the star type movie. I want to keep going. I want to go back to talk about his wife in the movie. Her role reminded me a lot of Felicity Jones's role in The Theory of Everything. I think that The Theory of Everything about Stephen Hawking, and how what was it? Stephen Hawking's wife, played by Felicity Jones, was basically she lived his life according to his needs, Stephen Hawking's needs, because she knew that Stephen Hawking was the star, but he was also disabled, so she had to take care of him. She had basically gave up her life to serve him until they got a divorce, and she married. They got divorced, and then she got married, and then she finally had enough freedom to live her life. And Stephen Hawking got his own helper, which he also ultimately married, I think. So, but the Freddie Mercury's wife in Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, was sort of the same thing. She, Freddie was the star. She was the one stayed at home and kind of held down the fort until he realized that there was more. He was too much just to be with the one person. But ultimately, they and I read this even before the movie came out. I read this where she is the love of his life for his whole life. Like his boyfriend, where he cut his hair and grew a mustache, that was sort of like just a temporary thing. So it just reminded me of the Theory of Everything, Felicity Jones' role. And those characters were portrayed with compassion, I think, also. Freddie Mercury's wife, it felt the way the things happened. They fell in love. He became famous. It was too much for her to handle, and they had to break up, and she had to find her own life. All those happened very organically. It wasn't like a soap opera caricature breakup. I like that, and it wasn't sensationalist. It wasn't like with the People versus Larry Flint movie. That was another great movie by Oliver Stone, where Larry Flint's wife. It was almost fictional looking, because you couldn't believe that this actually happened, but supposedly it really happened, and it felt almost like a Al Pacino Scarface type story. Whereas a Bohemian Rhapsody, it felt like this happened to real people, and this is how it happened, and there were not crazy tantrums and people throwing stuff. It wasn't Jerry Springer. It was just the whole thing was done out of love, and there was kindness, and everybody cared for each other, and there were moments where Freddie Mercury did his flamboyant rock star crazy parties at his house. But the way the movie pulled back and brought him back, where he gave up that life, and then he finally got sick and died of AIDS, HIV. I think it was treated with kindness, with compassion, with responsibility, without making anybody look like a cartoon character. And I think that's the strength of Bohemian Rhapsody, the movie, is that, where every character is treated with respect, and they were complete. They were people. They were not rock stars or idols or cartoon characters. They were not even icons. And it's very hard to do that, especially if you're a fan of whatever you're producing or directing, like Bryan Singer was. You have to distance yourself so you can tell it honestly, almost journalistically, without being a fanboy about it. And I think they pulled it off. Everybody involved pulled it off, and probably the icing on the cake, the cherry on top, was the whole thing was created with the blessings of the remaining members of Queen, Brian May, Roger Taylor, and John Deacon. They basically gave their blessings for this movie to be made. And so let's see what happens at the Oscars this coming Sunday, how the movie will turn out. So again, Rami Malek, everybody else has talked so much about him, I don't even want to mention how good he is in this movie. It took me probably a minute before I forgot that it was Rami Malek, the actor, and I just accepted him as Freddie Mercury. And I'm looking at a historical, almost like a documentary reenactment of Freddie Mercury's life, played by Freddie Mercury. Even though the voices were, Rami Malek's voice is much lower. His speaking voice is much lower than Freddie Mercury's. So I think that's it. That's 28 minutes. Wow, I talked a lot about Bohemian Rhapsody. But yeah, it's worth watching. It's a good movie. It's probably one of the best musical biopics that I've ever watched. And I keep going back to how they kind of tempered the flamboyance of it, even though Freddie Mercury has always been larger than life. They were able to capture his humanity, his humanness, without showing so many of his flaws that it became sour. And so again, the director, the screenwriter, the casting director, whoever cast this movie was a genius, and the supporting actors and Rami Malek should be commended. When you think about it, like, how big could this movie be? It's Bohemian Rhapsody. It's about a band whose height of fame was almost 30 years ago, and whose lead singer died, 15 years ago? And yet it still feels important. So I'm gonna end it right there, and hopefully I'm in focus. I'm trying out a new camera. So thank you very much for spending your time with me. If you like this video, I promise to make more videos. It's been almost 2 years since I've been making a lot of videos regularly and podcasts. So I hope to resume this, and until next time, if you like, please subscribe. Click on the subscribe button and give me a like. And there's so many things to talk about still. I still want to talk about The Last Jedi, the upcoming Star Wars movie. You got the Avengers Endgame coming up. You have Captain Marvel, Brie Larson, next week, 2 weeks from now? And a whole bunch of other movies. Adam Driver movie that I want to talk about. It's called Patterson. It's on Amazon Prime right now. And until next time, this is Gerardo San Diego for the Daily Night, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.